Hi everyone, thank you for joining us and welcome to the diversity session of India ADR Week 2022. First and foremost, a big thanks to the Khaitan team for hosting us and for making this entire event possible. With that, I'll start with introducing our panelists today. We have Jyoti to my right, who is a counsel at Khaitan, and she practices in both litigation and arbitration. So thanks for being here, Jyoti. To my left, we have Ankita, who is a counsel who appears very regularly in the Bombay High Court and also appears in arbitration matters. Thanks for being here, Ankita. We have virtually joining us Sheila, who is a partner at Allen and Overy. She is based in Singapore, and she's also the co-chair of the YMCIA. And last but not the least, we have Payel, who is the head of litigation in Adani. So thanks for being here. With that, I think we can just start off because this is the topic that's very interesting, and I think all of us sitting on this side and clearly even in terms of the participants is very passionate about. Over the last few years, we have seen an increasing interest in ensuring that there is diversity in arbitration, in dispute resolution, and in the corporate world as a whole. And this diversity has been more focused on gender specific inclusion. There have been more efforts, I would think, in terms of increasing arbitrator appointments for women as opposed to other spheres. We have, of course, the arbitration pledge, which is working very hard in that direction. HKIAC has come up with women in arbitration. Their LCI, ICC, the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, all institutions are constantly publishing statistics to show how they have grown the number of women arbitrators in general. But appointing women as arbitrators is only one step, and before you can get there, we have to ensure diversity in every other field. At the end of the day, our arbitrator pool is partners, women in senior positions, ex-judges who are women, and in order to get there, you have to start right at the beginning. So the question that I think we all ask ourselves is, have we really made any progress? And Ankita, specifically as far as appearing in courts is concerned, that is something which has always been very male-centric. And traditionally, we've seen male senior counsels. Even today, there aren't those many female role models and women who are, appearing regularly in courts or getting a senior gown. What has your experience been in general?
Hello. Yeah. So, that's actually a very good starting point for this discussion for a few reasons. I was having this discussion with someone as late as 2 weeks ago when Rajni Iyer, who I'm sure all of you have heard of, passed away from a protracted illness. And then we realized that we have no other commercial designated senior currently in the Bombay High Court. Now, of course, it comes from the fact that there are very few women practicing at the bar. There are especially few in Bombay, which is a paradox of current because we are the commercial court in the country. We do some of the biggest commercial litigation matters here. Despite that, there are extremely few women, and it has to do very candidly with the fact that it's not a very nurturing environment for women counsels to develop in. It's not an environment which assists, which bolsters women counselship at the bar. So, there are various levels at which hurdles exist, and they start from top downwards, as these things always do. So, whether there are inherent biases which are centuries old, starting from the judiciary, coming to your peers' treatment of you, to your being perceived by solicitors as being able to carry a matter, and then, of course, percolating down to the client. Now, having said that, I've been practicing for the past 15, 16 years, I think, at the Bombay Bar. And in that sense, counsel practice also has a bit of a stigma in that it's perceived as, a family profession. You come from a known sort of source. So not having had either of those springboards, so to speak, what I personally found was in my tenure previously in Janak Dwarkadas's chamber and for the past 5 years in my own chamber, that talent which manages to sustain itself at the bar does come into recognition. And since we are in the sort of ADR frame of mind right now, to just give you an example of how this has been boosted, Bombay High Court judges were amongst the first in the country to appoint young counsels as arbitrators to arbitrate disputes, small quantum disputes, mid quantum disputes, some even large quantum disputes where parties did not want to go to retired judges or to known arbitrators, either fee consideration, time consideration. And the movement started by the High Court, has also been lauded by our Chief Justice designate, Justice Chatterjee, that it was in fact the Bombay High Court who started these appointments. And when I tell people that I've been acting as an arbitrator for the past 8 years, it shocks them. And the volume of work that we do. So I think that has been one of the single most encouraging moves to put into action what so many people have been talking about in terms of diversity for a very long time. And that has been an incredible experience because not only does it give you a chance to see a dispute from the side of the court, which is a very unique perspective, but it also helps you sharpen your skill as a lawyer because you continue to appear in matters as a lawyer. So I think that has been a seminal move, and that has really broken a lot of barriers for us.
That's actually very interesting to note because while it has broken barriers and it is definitely giving a push to women, we still have to see the results, and hopefully we will get there in the next few years and the next few generations of lawyers, and women will not be scared to venture down that path.
So Shreya, I would, we always speak in decades in counsel practice, and I know it's a very dated concept in today's day, but honestly, the number of changes required are so many and so systemic that I think it's going to take a real push and time for the culture to change. Right? It is changing. It is changing. I won't say it is not. But at the same time, it's not changing fast enough. It's not changing fast enough for you to see it in a few years, maybe a generation down. Like I said, if you manage to stick it out, as they say, if you manage to stay at the cream, you will be recognized. But there are too many hurdles. And that actually leads people to compare why should we be facing so many hurdles in counsel practice when there is a alternative available in the form of law firms, who are encouraging people to work in-house practice, all of which is equally gratifying.
Yeah, so coming to law firms then, Jyoti, you've been in law firms for several years now. So what has your experience been?
So, first of all, I just wanted to say that I think Ankita, what she put forth was quite insightful and is just probably scratching the surface in terms of the challenges that women face, not just in the legal industry, but across industries. And taking from that and coming to my experience, what it has been in law firms, and I've been working in law firms throughout my career. I have 14 years of experience. It's been a bit of a struggle. It has been there's been a sort of discrimination. There has been a sort of bias, which has been at some levels very bad. At some levels, it's been very slight, very gradual, I would say. At the same time, I wouldn't say that there haven't been people or seniors or colleagues and peers who have not been encouraging about it. In fact, that's a large part of something which has helped me grow as a professional and helped me maintain that confidence and courage to move forward. Is the mentorship and the guidance and the encouragement that I've got from many of my seniors. Just to give you an example of some of the challenges, or in that sense, some of the experiences that I've had while seeing this gender inclusivity or the lack thereof. In many of the arbitrations, for instance, since we are discussing ADR, the opponents, if there's a team of lawyers in an arbitration, I would see that there would rarely be a woman on the other side. In fact, for that matter, there would, and as Ankita mentioned that she's been, doing arbitrations for the past 8 years, she's been an arbitrator for the past 8 years. In my experience, I've in fact just come across one arbitration where I had a lady judge on the panel. So that just goes on to show that we are yet to make progress. I'm not saying that we haven't made progress, but we are yet to make progress by leaps and bounds to reach a stage where we can say that yes, we have somewhat achieved a degree of gender inclusivity. To give a couple of other instances also, for instance, what I have faced or what I have experienced in the arbitration uh, sector, same thing I wouldn't say it's not there in litigation. Although in litigation, in court practice, you would see a lot more women appearing, etc., in court, and you would see a lot of younger crowd. It's only gradually as people have progressed, they've had other responsibilities at home, and for some reason or the other, and we'll of course get to that in a while. The challenges, real challenges which are faced in the industry. But yes, in terms of court practice, in terms of litigation, you would see far more opponents who are women. But yes, not at the degree that you would expect.
Thanks for that. So, Sheila, what do you think in terms of practicing in an international law firm in Singapore? Do you think it's very different from what you hear about firms in India? And what has been your journey?
Thanks, Shreya. And it's great to be part of this, even if virtually. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I think a lot of what Jyoti said obviously resonates, and there are a lot of sort of similarities in terms of stories and experiences. And actually, that's not a bad thing, that we're all experiencing something similar, and maybe if the problems are the same, so might be the solutions. My own background, I'm currently based in Singapore, but actually I've spent a large part of my career in Hong Kong. I was educated in part in the UK and did some training there. I was also based in Mumbai for a good part of a year in 2011. So I've sort of been on the ground in a number of jurisdictions. I'm an international arbitration practitioner for my sins, and I work across many, many markets in Asia. This is not a CV pitch kind of thing, but just to give you the scene setting. And I've also done lots of hearings in London. Against all of that, I was just reflecting on this really interesting topic, which was very articulately introduced by Shreya, I thought. And I was just thinking the number of times I was in the room and I was the only person who looked like me. The number of times I never got asked if I had a view, and everybody else would chime in without being asked, and I waited to be asked and I never was. The number of times that only when it came to producing a clean note of a meeting did people sort of turn to the woman in the room and said, you do that. I've sort of been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and I can't even sort of stand here and say today, or sit here because I'm virtual, and say today that, look, it's all different and it's all in the past. And I think there are two facets to this, right? And there's actually more than two, but from my perspective, there's two. There's the gender diversity and there's the ethnic diversity. And there's various stages in a law firm career that you reflect on, what is my position, what is my future path, and how realistic am I about being able to achieve it. When you start, you look at, issues from being of a young age and female and trying to prove that you can hold your own even though you're the only one that looks like you. Your gray hair is growing the slowest. To the next stage of wanting to get married and have children, but trying not to say that out loud and trying to prove that you still value your work and work hard in your role, and you still want that partnership track that others who never talk about marriage or children, they do it, but just don't talk about it like you may want to. But that doesn't mean that it's, your only priority. To getting more senior, actually, and then showing that you are paving the way for women up and coming, and that you are the right mentor figure in setting the scene as, what a role model should be. I was told when I first had my twin girls that, oh, that's great, because not from somebody in the community, that we need more women who actually do that traditional thing as well and also have the law firm job. And these sort of cliched comments. I'd go on business trips, and a lot of I had young children at the same time as some other male counterparts who were traveling with me, none of whom would get asked the question that I got asked: oh, if you are here, who's looking after your kids? So it's all those cliches that I'm afraid still exist. And that's sort of subjective in each market, how the markets are progressing, each market, each firm, each practice. So it's difficult to, I think, draw conclusions. The other thing I ask myself is, who are the culprits? Are they those traditional men that we say, you guys are the ones that are not, the subconscious bias or unconscious bias and all of that? Or are they the women who have suffered the hardship and think, well, why should it be easier going forward? Or actually, are they the younger generation themselves who are just in this whirlwind and think, I don't know how to seize the opportunity and just get on with it. So I guess we're at least asking these questions. And I can't say that for a good part of my 15-year career, these questions were being asked, let alone aired in, a session across the country pretty much. Can I just spend a minute on the arbitrator perspective? So I've also spent the later part of my 15-year career being an arbitrator. And I've been watching these stats, and it's really interesting because on the face of it, it's great because the stats are going up, especially if you look at the last 10 years relative to the previous 20. So if you look at a span of 3 decades, starting to give age away a little bit, but that's a good thing. The most recent decade as compared to the preceding 2, you see a real change in the numbers, a real shift in what the sort of female related statistics look like in decision makers. And that's important, right? Because we want women in the right chairs, not just occupying chairs in a room to take notes. So whilst on the face of it, these stats are going up, what I would say about that is, first of all, kudos to the institutions. I think they've done a really good job, and the stats do speak for themselves. I think, Shreya, you know that your firm has written a piece on this, in fact, where they've reported the stats in a very methodical way, which I found myself engaged with, to the point where I think I joined a bit late for the practice session today. But it's very interesting looking at those numbers, because you do see that across the board, institutions are looking at, you talk to the MCIA, the ICC, LCIA, HKICC, all of them, women's stats are going up. But I'll mention the flip side. First of all, I think the same can't be said of party appointments. So where there are party appointment opportunities, are women still being thrown into the mix? Maybe as a result of the pledge, but maybe not so naturally still. Very importantly, I think we're seeing party appointed, or wing arbitrators rather, in the form of women. Are we seeing sole arbitrators? Are we seeing emergency arbitrators? Are we seeing chair appointments? Not so much. In fact, when I did pull up the statistics and looked a bit a different set of stats, actually these are ICA-based stats. What I found is of sole arbitrator appointments, this is across the board, so it's not confined to any geographical model or institution, of course. 2/3 of sole arbitrators are still men, approximately 1/3 are women, and this is, one has to look at the footnote and the demographic for these stats, but that aside, emergency arbitrators, again, 2/3 men, tribunal chairs, more than twice as many men as women, and all women tribunals. Of the survey that was done in 2021, 97.5 all men and 2.5% all women. So when you look at those stats, you think, well, actually, how much progress are we really making in the grander scheme of things? And my final point on this is another I guess, angle, which is a different intersection, which is cultural. Um, you look at these arbitrator candidates who are female, and most of them, and it's a great story on that front, but they're mostly European and American by way of background. I think where we're seeing a real sort of missing piece is Asian and Asia in the wider sense, and African originated backgrounds. And I really think that that's why I said there's different, I guess, demographics to what we're talking about as diversity. And I think ethnic diversity, we shouldn't wait till we achieve good goals on gender before we then turn around and say, okay, now let's start looking at ethnic. It's just all too late. So those are some stats, some different angles, I guess, including my own. But I think the question is, and I think to Ankita's point, which I thought was hits the nail on the head, is the dial moving quickly enough? My own view is that COVID did help with this. Frankly, it helped reset some scenes. It created some level playing fields because we didn't all have to be physically shuttling around. It could actually multitask. And, people like having a kid or two in the background sometimes. You need those level playing fields for things to move at the pace that they should be. Because in my view, it's one could describe it as too little too late, or, little bit snail paced.
Thanks for that, Sheila. But picking up on one of the things that you said, which is that you need women in the right chairs, you need women in decision-making positions, and that actually brings me to Payel, because Payel, you're heading the litigation practice and of Adani, and what has that been like for you? You're effectively the one who decides whether any of us get
Thank you so much, everyone. I think you have put me at a very difficult spot over here, Shreya. With all these three strong, successful women have already haven't spoken their mind. I don't know what more is there for me to add, but I'm just going to try my 2 bits. And given what I have felt so far in my 13 years of work ex, I think what is gender diversity? Let's just look at more from a macro perspective. It's a numbers game at the end of the day, and there is a massive gap. I think I would start with that. And looking more from a corporate perspective is, I think there was an interesting IBA survey where they said, especially from a corporate perspective, it's no longer the right thing to do. It's rather the smart thing to do, that you need to have more women in the organization. There are various reasons and factors for that. Now, I think I'll give you a very small example. There are several investments that take place. There are several acquisitions that take place. And more often than not, you hear an investor saying, what is the gender diversity ratio in your particular organization? So, I mean, there are a lot of reasons for which the corporates today have a policy in place itself, which looks at diversity and inclusivity. Let me give you more of a personal experiences on what I think people have faced, heard from my peers, or I have gone through in the last 13 years. I think one example which I could totally relate with Sheila was being the only person in the room who's the woman and rest surrounded by 10 to 15 men. Maybe we have reached a little stage in our careers where we are not always the one taking the notes, though maybe the first initial years, it was a given. You are the person who will take the notes. Where we have moved slightly ahead and maybe we are in leadership positions, but it's still an effort to make yourself heard. You are making a point, but if it's the same point which is being made by a member from a different different gender, the kind of reactions or the responses, there is still a difference. I mean, whether we talk about it, whether we address it, but that difference still exists. The other aspect I have seen is, which I think more than a gender diversity issue, is a more societal issue, the travel and safety of women. I mean, I think Sheila mentioned about the kind of questions, but when you're traveling in India, there's a lot of concern about which parts of the country you're traveling for your matters. I mean, more often than not, maybe from a good space itself, you're being told that it may not be right for you to travel in that particular location. Okay, there are maybe factors responsible, which is not safe enough, but I am a woman. I have taken a career decision. Let me decide for myself whether I want to take that risk and walk that extra mile, travel to that location. I have worked on a matter completely. It's not fair for me not to be there in person and actually witness the action, not witness the action, just because maybe my gender, you think, may not be the right to be in that particular position. But I think overall, from a perspective as to whether we have progressed, yes, we have, but there's a long way to go. I mean, there are enough and more women general counsels in our country today. But if you see at the ratio, it might still be a 10% ratio of women who are actually there. And that ratio is also skewed. You see more women at junior levels. You don't see that many actually rising up and going to this leadership position. And I think there is two sides to it. It's not just saying that women who have reached a leadership position need to support women, empower them, allow them to come up, but men are equally responsible for that. I mean, I think I'm lucky that way. I have had all my former bosses who have been men, and I'm sure they must have seen something and they had selected and hired me at different stages. So men are equally party to it, equally responsible. So both need to go hand in hand for us to actually achieve this gender diversity and have a, I would say, a balanced playing, level playing field for all of us.
Thank you for that. And actually, what you're saying is true not only for women CEOs, but it's also true for women partners, women senior counsel, as Ankita also pointed out, because we do naturally end up seeing more women in executory roles as opposed to leadership or management positions. And just thinking about law firms, Sheila, would you have any inputs as to why that may happen, in law firms, and what practical tips each individual woman arbitration practitioner or legal practitioner could think of or adopt in their career path to overcome that?
I mean, as to why things are the way they are, I'd be interested to hear, Jyoti, your views as well. But and Shreya, actually, your views as well, obviously. And you've been elevated to the partnership at a brilliant firm, so it'd be great to hear your thoughts. But I think that a lot of this is legacy. Actually, it's a generational shift, right? And if it was so easy, it really would have been done by now. So I would say it's not for want of trying. It's just that it's just really monumental shift, and it also takes a lot of mindset changing, which is very different to actually sort of producing stuff. So I think, to Payel's point, if it came down to producing numbers and things, you do see firms who say these are our targets and we try and meet them, but they shouldn't be seen as quotas. So they shouldn't be seen as we're just trying to fill those numbers. I was told by someone in the year that I was up for partnership, oh, how come you're up for partnership already? Oh, yeah, you're a woman. And, there must be some quota that, that your law firm is trying to fulfill. And you sort of think, what does one do in this situation? I actually wanted to share a little anecdote, which is that I started my, I obviously went into arbitration because I wanted to become an advocate, and I felt that it was quite nice to do it internationally, because I'm also a little bit of a jet setter. My kids don't love that bit, but I started my first hearing as lead advocate about 10 years ago. And when I did that, I felt that, the opportunity, I wasn't ready for the opportunity, of course. Of course I felt that, right? And I was sort of, downplaying my own ability to myself and everyone who was willing to listen. And I entered the room, the hearing room, and we had a very senior Indian judge, a very, very senior English judge, and a very senior Singapore silk. So, a very intimidating panel, to say at the least. And I was unpacking my bundles together with my junior, who is a Caucasian male and taller than me. And the other side had a silk who walked over to my colleague and said, could we discuss? And then my colleague was sort of busy on the phone. He hadn't noticed that. So then he turned to me and he said, Madam, didn't bother asking me what my name was. Obviously, I was part of the counsel team. He didn't bother, didn't notice I was sitting in the front seat. And he said, whenever your lead advocate is done with his phone call, could you ask him to come to me and tell me if we can agree the hearing order? And I said, I could, but he would ask you to refer back to me because I'm the one doing the advocacy. And he said, I see, and stopped for a very long pause. And I thought, you know what, contrary to my instinct, I'm not going to fill that pause. So I stood there and watched this moment pass, and it was a fun moment. And that was my first experience. So what I would say out of that is 3 don'ts and 3 do's. The don'ts are, don't focus on the fact that you're an exception. Don't just enter the room and think, oh gosh, I'm the only one who looks like me. Don't focus on that. It takes a lot of consciousness, but don't attribute your success to someone else or to luck. It's you. And just remember that. Don't start with the assumption that something's out of reach, just like I did that day. And then I thought, you know what? Bit of French going on in my head. And then do's. First of all, I would say speak first if you can. I think it's really empowering. And actually, when you do it, you realize how easy it is, and it's such an easy one to overcome. Tell yourself that you're good at what you do. I think, there is a lot happening in our lives, and we do need to remind ourselves that sometimes out loud, which is what I do when I'm on business trips. Really fun standing in a hotel room by yourself, telling yourself how brilliant you are. And finally, I would say, don't think that life is either or. You can want multiple things out of life. So do seize them all is the point. And that's my advice.
That's actually very, very, very helpful. Thanks a lot. And in fact, your anecdote reminded me of one of my experiences where I was appearing in a Section 8 petition, which was a reference to arbitration in the Bombay High Court at that time. And I had instructions to appear in the matter. The client had a very small budget for that matter, which is probably why they let me appear. But I, started and removed my papers, and the judge actually insisted on me asking my colleague, who was, he is absolutely brilliant, but much younger than me. The judge insisted that he should argue, and he said, no, why aren't you letting your senior argue the matter? And I said, but I am the senior on the matter, and therefore I am arguing. And it was a dialogue of a few seconds, in fact, maybe even a minute. And finally, I said, I'm sorry, but my client's instructions are for me to argue. Are you going to let me go ahead with the matter or not? And this was a few years ago, but I do feel like things have changed already since then. And it also comes down to how assertive you're willing to be. So, Ankita, do you think that being assertive in court is something which you would recommend, not recommend, or is it just viewed as aggressive when it's coming from a woman?
So, Shreya, experience completely relatable. I was thinking to myself when Sheila was telling her anecdote that, I mean, in the 16 years of practice, this has been a common fare for at least the first 10 years, starting from the High Court to the Supreme Court, where so often while assisting seniors, especially in the Supreme Court, you have to be prepared that the senior who you've engaged for what is effectively a final hearing of that matter for all time to come will not show up. And you have to have the confidence at the spur of the moment to get up, take over the matter, appear before the highest court in the country, opposing most likely multiple seniors, if at least not one, and stand your ground, make yourself be heard. Now, whether that comes from being assertive, I'm not entirely sure that I would like to use the word assertive. What I would like to use is the word consistent. My experience has been that if over a period of time you have consistently performed and you have consistently come across as a person who can be relied on to put up a good performance, because in court they say you're only as good as your last performance, no matter who you are. So if you put up a good show, that is, you're well prepared, you have gauged the mood of the court correctly, you've gauged the mood of the other side, and you've stated your point without wasting time, you will start to accumulate the respect that really is, in that sense, probably given easier to a male counterpart. And I think the reason for that is familiarity, that they've just been around in court far longer than women have. There are far more of them than women have been. And there is a gender familiarity between the bench and the male colleagues up here. Having said that, when I found that even the toughest judges, when they see a consistently good performance by a junior, or when they would see perhaps Shreya hold her own at the end of 5 minutes, they would turn around quite quickly. They would turn around quite quickly. They would give you the attention you probably deserve from the word go. And that in itself is a very satisfying feeling, because yes, you had to work harder than your male counterpart, but at the same time, you have seen the result of your hard work there and then. Now, having said that, I don't pretend to say that it is not frustrating to have to work doubly hard. I also don't pretend to advocate the belief that you should not be getting your just desserts as soon as your male counterparts are getting. But unfortunately, I take a leaf from what Sheila has said. It does not help to focus on the negatives. It only ends up weakening your position. So it's a good place mentally, emotionally, to go into a courtroom, an arbitration room, with a sense of confidence and a sense of consistency, a sense of solidity that I'm here to make a point, and I will make that point even if it takes me a little more time than it's perhaps necessary, and that will probably be needed by somebody else by virtue of their gender. And that consistency, more than assertiveness, I have found personally, stands you in far better stead.
Thanks. So essentially the key is preparedness, just being prepared, being on top of the game at every point in time and not giving up. I think
Patience is the name of the game. You have to be mentally and emotionally a very patient person to allow the process to recognize you. Because, I started by saying this, and that's been my experience, that if you do perform consistently, there's no way that you will not be recognized. Yes, you have to inbuild the patience to not get frustrated that, it's taking longer for your recognition to come than perhaps a male counterpart. Yeah. But, after a point, if you start doing well, the gender almost fades into oblivion. It doesn't exist. Like, I find after 16 years, almost nobody notices in court that I'm the only woman in perhaps 50 matters. And that's an amazing feeling. It's an incredibly empowering feeling to know that, the example about being the only woman in a room. But imagine being the only woman in a court where, 50 or 100 matters have been called out, the only woman who is arguing but not instructing, because otherwise, as Jyoti will tell you, a lot of women solicitors are instructing male counsel. Or as Shreya said, the reaction she faced in court. Because that's how things have progressed, over the past 150 years in the court system here. But once you embrace the feeling and decide not to let it hold you back, it can be very empowering.
Thanks for that, Ankita. And Payel, just in general, it seems that women empower other women, and all of us are constantly here with all of us sitting here having this discussion, encouraging each other, encouraging everybody who's participating in this session to not give up. But in the corporate world, you probably tend to see fewer women. So in fact, even as far as directorship on companies is concerned, it's now mandatory for companies to have a woman director, but that's probably where it ends. So what are the challenges that you face being an in-house counsel, and what tips would you have for women who want to follow in your footsteps?
So Shreya, I think the principle still remains the same, no matter whether I am in front of a court or I'm in a law firm or I'm in-house. I think Ankita summarized it really well, that patience is the key word. I won't deny that there have been times when I was very frustrated and I said, why do I need to put double the effort? Is it required? Or is it maybe I am not that good enough, where you start questioning your own merit itself? Because maybe the way you're progressing, it's slightly not at the same pace as your male counterpart. So yes, those questions are bound to come. And I think, as Ankita said, consistency, but I think the other thing is what I have learned it the hard way, a lot of us, maybe at times human nature or the way people are, you tend to put your head down and just work initially, but hoping or expecting that you will be understood or getting your due the way you are putting in your whatever you're putting in your matters. But at times it's important to speak up. It's really important that you speak your mind and say that this is what you're doing or what you're expecting out of a particular situation or a particular job which you're doing at hand, because it's not always necessary that it's understood. You need to stand up for yourself and nobody is going to come and be your savior. So whether it's be in the corporate world or it be in a law firm, I think the mantra has to be the same, that put in the hard work which is necessary. Merit will speak for itself. Opportunities will come along. It could be delayed, it could be early, it could be maybe at the right opportune time itself. But not speaking up for yourself when it's necessary. Obviously, you need to be careful. You can't overdo it. You can't keep saying that, okay, because of this, I'm not being giving these opportunities. You can't go on a rant. But recognize when it's actually required. And I think that's where it's very important to have good mentors in our profession, especially because they guide you, they tell you when to do what. And maybe you look up at their careers itself and their career graph as to how they have progressed. And it's not just restricted to you, but maybe for my juniors as well and people who are going to come later in the profession. If you have imbibed that from your seniors, you have seen it, you are going to bound to pass it along, actually. So I think it's a very important element that the entire mentorship which we have in our profession, you need to have the right match in place, because then you actually pass it along. So even if I'm in a corporate, and frankly, given the group I am in, I have seen a massive increase in the number of women that have been hired in the last 1 year. I mean, suddenly when I go to the cafeteria, I see a lot many women, and it gives me a lot of pleasure. It's not just the legal team, but it's across teams where I see a lot of women. And it shows that there is somewhere, even if it's not at a great extent, there is a shift that's happening. And we need more women, and I would stress men as well, to have that mindset so that we have more women on the table, actually.
Thank you. And just coming back to you, Jyoti. So, as far as mentorship, and you also mentioned that you've had great mentorship and that has helped progress your career and it's helped you grow. But do you think, in general, as far as organizations are concerned, there are other things that need to be taken into account? Things that maybe inherently women face, issues that we have, which maybe men may not understand, or they may not want to understand, to put it differently. For example, a lot of countries have started, you know, a mandatory policy where women are entitled to menstrual leave. Or today, India has a great maternity leave policy where you get 6 months of maternity leave. So do you think that these things make a big difference? And what's your take on that?
So before I get to that, I just want to touch upon what you said earlier, and that's the anecdote that you shared, your experience in the court and how the judge reacted. It's the mindset at the end of the day. It's the unconscious bias. It's the stereotypical behavior that women face in general, which needs to be addressed. So there's, it's not that people get out of their houses with an intention that, oh, today I'm going to, let's give some work to my team, but I will not give work to a lady in the team. So the point that I'm trying to say is that there are instances where our male counterparts or our seniors or people who work along with us, men, women included, they are not aware of this unconscious bias and this stereotypical behavior that is being passed on for a very long time. And this is an example of that. I'm sure that after you may have argued for a few minutes, and as Ankita pointed out, after you present to the court that you're prepared, you're consistent, and you are a performer, they will immediately change their minds. But why should they think that in the first place? Is the question that I'm asking here today. So, to bring in that awareness, it's important to bring in that awareness at all levels in any organization. so long as people will remain ignorant of that fact, there won't be any real change. Payel pointed out, and very rightly so, that it's a numbers game, and everyone's trying to show the numbers, and you can see the stats that it's increasing. But is there any substantial change? Is there a real change? Do we and I'm sure that we ourselves, even women, are guilty of that unconscious bias, of that stereotypical behavior. So it's a change that needs to be brought into all levels. Maybe training programs to that effect would help. Maybe there are a number of things that you can do it, but once you recognize that there is a problem and there is more awareness that you need to raise about it. Coming to what you were asking me, yes, maternity leaves in India is excellent, and we have excellent policies over here, and we have them in law firms also. But again, I don't want to sound negative about the whole thing, but it's a fact, and that women do face a lot of bias. Because the people that they work with, they know that at some point, oh, she's married, so she will be taking maternity leave. Also, we can't be putting her on, real bigger, say, topics or bigger responsibilities. Or if she does, decide to go on maternity leave, then there is a gap in her career. And when she comes back, let's say she decides to take a gap, take a break from her career, and then decides to apply again to some organization, some law firm, some company. And then they will always question it, oh, you have a gap in your experience. So we will, of course, have to consider that when we take you up. And then there are multiple challenges that are faced. There's pay discrimination. There is, you might have to work with somebody who might be junior to you, or you might have to work under that person, and it may not be the same. So the point that I'm trying to make is that while we may have excellent policies, but that awareness and that need to make a change and make a difference insofar as gender inclusion is concerned, that needs to be there. People need to take that initiative to make women understand, and also make people around them understand that this is something that we all need to work together to bring about a change. Yes, there are policies. There are, you give them a maternity leave. Yes, they're entitled to it. All that is good. But at the end of the day, subconsciously or consciously, you are discriminating against them. Because when they come back, you're like, okay, now she's come back. Now we know that she will not be able to work, say, the 8 or 9 hours that we expect her to work. We can't put her on bigger tasks. So yes, these are challenges that are being faced, and this is one of the reasons why you don't see women at senior positions or as many women as you'd like. Yes, we've made progress. There are a lot more senior partners or GCs, and a lot of people at senior positions in the legal fraternity and across the industries also. But it's not as we'd like it to see. It's some of these challenges that people face. And coming to the menstrual issue, which has become quite a debate these days. Again, it's the same thing, because people would feel that, oh, she is somebody who would require a certain amount of leave every month. So whether is this a person who's reliable? Can I give her or can I put her? So already coming to the table with so many biases attached, and then to face that also, it's incredibly challenging. But I hope that, with these kind of discussions and more deliberations on the subject, and we need to have more of these, we can bring about more awareness, understanding, and I hope that people reflect more on it so that, they understand the problems that some of the people, some of women rather in their sector, in their industry are facing, and they are willing to make that change, willing to think that much, or take that extra step for them.
No, that's absolutely quite right. Because the first step towards finding a solution is arming yourself with knowledge, identifying the problem, and then trying to work to overcome that. So if firms or companies were to realize that we want to give women that chance even after maternity, one great step in that direction would be to have a creche or have some sort of service where your kids are taken care of, so mothers can go to work without worrying that I'm just not going to get that time with my child, and you just constantly feel guilty one way or another, whether it's missing work or missing out on your child. So I think these are small things which may make a difference. And I think, as Payel said, it also comes back to publishing statistics, because when you are made accountable for it, you will naturally try to do better and at least show that you're doing better. And that's just one step in the right direction. So, all in all, I think based on this very, very wonderful, helpful, insightful discussion, we can say that yes, we do have a long way to go, but we are all geared towards getting there. And hopefully, in time, we will. So, we're cautiously optimistic that the next generation of women lawyers will just have it a little bit easier. And I think that's as much as we can ask for. So thank you very much. Would any of you like to make any concluding remarks? Yes, please.
So just touching upon what we were discussing earlier, and I think Payel, Ankita, and Sheila had quite a few insights on women, how younger women in the profession can do things to maybe get more recognition, maybe move forward without that whole bias, gender bias thing hanging over them. And I think those are very, very helpful and insightful things where women need to be more proactive, where they need to take the initiative, where they need to speak up. And not just when it comes to taking responsibility, also when things are going wrong. If they feel that there is something which is not right, or they are being put to something or made to do some sort of work which they don't think is right, then they should definitely speak up. Because as long as you don't identify the issue, the other person would always be ignorant about it, or may just simply be unaware about the challenges that you're facing. So it's very important that you build that character requirement, that look, I'm going to go and I'm going to speak up, whether the other person thinks that it's required, not required. I'm going to speak up because I don't think this is right. So I think that's something which is very helpful and encouraging for at least the younger lot, and I hope that they can take away from this. The other thing that I just wanted to add on was with regard to the mentorship issue that we spoke about, and I think mentorship is one of the most important aspects which really help the younger lot, men, women included. And it's very nice, in fact, when there is a woman member, at least for women, and I can say from personal experience that when there's a woman senior person and when you speak to them and learn from their experience, it's really helpful. They may not be a mentor to you, but even learning from their experience gives you a lot of insight. And I think a lot of people, a lot of women entering in the profession, freshers, maybe at junior level or whichever level, should try and build upon that and try to network with that. That will be really helpful.
Thank you. So I think we can now open it up for any questions that the participants may have. I've received one in the question and answer box, so I'll just read that out. When we talk about diversity, we mean diversity with merit rather than by way of a mechanical quota system in which we are only trying to fill the numbers, as the panel has said. I think it's quite uncontroversial that women are better than their male counterparts in almost all roles. So this mindset has become unfortunately dominant in many circles and needs to be corrected. If there is a woman partner, the first thought should be that it's merit driven. Any thoughts from the panel on this, and building on Sheila's experience, is that changing? Sheila, would you like to take that?
Yes, I mean, I think we are the change, aren't we? I mean, I did my partnership interview with ANO some years ago, and I had a panel full of people, and there were lots of scary topics. And then it came to diversity, and they said, "Oh, what do you think we can do as a firm to improve diversity?" And I said, "I am diversity. You need more people like me sitting in this chair, and then in your chair, actually." And then they sort of looked at each other, and then they just smiled and carried on. And at the end, they actually said, "That was a better answer than we've heard actually in quite some time." So I can't say I was proud of much of that interview, but I was proud of that one question. And I think we are the answer to that. I think we've got to get in the room and actually, going back to my point about sitting in the right chair. Um, what I would say about, I thought that Jyoti's words were very telling about, there's lots of enabling mechanisms, but does that really sort of go beneath the scratching of the surface? There's policies, but who's really still accountable for them? And I think statistics is one angle. I would say report, 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 because everyone, you look at governments like macro, and then corporations, practices, everyone is accountable to statistics. So the point's been made, and I very much support that. From an individual perspective, what I would say is embrace that opportunity. So it doesn't matter what the person supervising you is thinking. You come back from your maternity leave, you still go home when you want to. The hardest thing for me to do was to pick up my handbag before my secretary and head home for bedtime. But then you stay up at night and produce a better witness statement than your counterparts are capable of. And you are eligible for leadership roles. You put up your hand and you do them. And eventually, to Ankita's point, when nobody bats an eyelid because you're the same woman who's in the room the whole time, you've made a change. And I think that change is happening. I think we're probably examples of that in this whole audience, not just us, but in the whole audience. And just the fact we're having this conversation, to which we have Khaitan and MCIA to thank, I think is a huge sort of paradigm shift, actually.
Thank you. Thanks, Sheila. And we have another question, which is a big aspect is the limited networking opportunities that have historically been available to women rising stars. This includes both internal and external networking opportunities. This is because of the male-centric activities that we usually prefer, such as watching sport, grabbing a beer, or any such thing. How can we change that? This might require a larger overhaul. Any experiences or thoughts from the panel? Ankita, would you like to weigh in?
So that's a great question because it has been a bit of a boys' club, locker room scenario for a very long time. And traditionally, I know that I feel the compulsion to finish my work and head home. This was even before I had a baby. So when it was just me and my husband, because I would much rather spend time in the activities I enjoy outside of work. And obviously that would mean that I would say no to a drinks after work or perhaps a dinner at the bar, etc. Having said that, while yes, networking opportunities are very important, perhaps far more relevant in a law firm and a corporate setup than they are in a counsel practice situation. Once again, I find that yes, they do add some percentage to the experience that you would have as a lawyer, but it's not a percentage which will otherwise matter if you're doing well at work. And if you're seen as the kind of person who can consistently deliver good work, at the highest, you would be labeled as a no-nonsense person. And it's not the worst of labels to have, I find. But it's not necessary to, when making your list of priorities, to kill yourself over every single item. You've got to prioritize that from the bottom downwards. I'm ready to let this go. I'm ready to let this go. But the top 3 or 4 are non-negotiable for me. And it's a choice that comes to all of us. It comes to all our tables. And I would say, because there are a lot of heartburn moments. Oh, I wish I'd gone to that dinner. So many important judges turned up. Oh, I wish I'd gone to that meeting, things like that. But I find that people who are going to engage you or who are going to brief you would brief you not so much because of the networking opportunity or because they saw you at the dinner, but because they saw you consistently do well in court or at work or at a meeting. So, don't give yourself unnecessary grief about it. I mean, if you had to let go of a few things, I would say you start from this
So your work speaks for itself, and that should.
Yeah, I'm not
In the
saying
long
I'm not saying it's unimportant. I'm sorry, that's not my meaning at all. It's not unimportant, but if you have to prioritize, like everybody does, right? Who's living in a city, in a family, etc. I would say that this should not give you an inordinate amount of hard work.
Would you like to weigh in on that?
So, as Ankita said, people in law firms and in-house would probably have more to say on the networking issue. So, yeah, yes, it is in the sense, I would say men have more opportunities, like there'll be a football club and there'll be people going for that, and we wouldn't have the same opportunity. We could, I mean, of course, there are now a lot of sports activities also where women are included, and that's a change. But insofar as networking is concerned, I agree with Ankita that yes, you need to prioritize. Also, you can schedule the networking the way you want to do it, because it's not necessary that you need to have a drinks after work. You can go take the client for a lunch. You can, maybe go meet them at their office or at like some common thing that you both enjoy doing. So I think there are different ways in which you can also do the same thing. It's just you need to broaden your mindset. And as Sheila said, that don't go on a rant about it. Everything's happening, everything's negative or whatever. Have a positive spin to it and try and do it your way.
And sorry, just a second. Payal, your views on this?
I think I'm just going to end on one thing that I think the initiative which we started a few years back in India with the Pledge India chapter itself, I think that's one of the greatest opportunities for women to come together. And though I'm not in Bombay anymore, but I keep looking at the WhatsApp group and the pictures that are being exchanged. And I'm glad that such kind of events are being organized. And it's giving an opportunity for women across firms, across corporates, as well as in the independent practice to come together, exchange ideas, and have their own set of party, which is ideal. Why should boys have all the fun? And last but not the least, I'm glad today it's not a panel and we have a full all women panel set up.
Thank you. I think we had a couple of questions. So if we could take your question first.
Thank you.
I think you just have one mic. So yeah.
I think the mics there.
Oh.
You can just speak. I think I'm confident that I'll be loud enough. Without unnecessary pressure on myself. I have actually two questions, and I found that my name is Alia, and I'm an associate at McGregor's in the London office. And I've seen a number of common themes in discussions also happening in that jurisdiction with respect to gender diversity. And there were 2 points that I thought would be great for to have slightly more detail on, which we've already touched on. The first is with respect to having more gender diversity, not just in the legal profession, but also in other rules as well. There's also a heightened sense of this awareness of gender diversity and the benefits, etc., within the legal profession. But do you think that without there being a requirement to wait for the critical mass to arise in the commercial rule, is that awareness just as important, and how do you see that rule developing, and how the legal profession can contribute to that? And the second question is around there being a requirement or usually a necessity for some kind of sanction for every initiative to succeed. And one of the potential sanctions that you discussed was publishing the statistics. Are there any other sanctions that you think are necessary or possible in the profession that could help us exacerbate the speed at which we're making this change?
Thank you. I think for any of these questions, Jyoti, Sheila, would you like to address them?
I'll try and answer your second question first because I remember it better. But so yes, I think apart from statistics, there's a lot that can be done, because at least on the domestic front, what I've noticed is that the statistics are not quite there. Even in terms of statistics, we don't have a lot of facts and figures in terms of what is being done generally on a gender inclusion perspective. I feel that a lot of and Payel had spoken about it earlier, that a lot of companies, a lot of law firms are taking initiatives, even institutions are taking initiatives for making more gender inclusive. But I feel that that needs to also transcend into real progress, in the sense, for instance, institutions and domestic institutions, and I am conscious of the fact that they are taking certain steps. But I think in terms of policies, in terms of procedural rules, in terms of having a panel of arbitrators with more experienced women on that, at a firm level, maybe sensitizing people at all levels, having tools, techniques where you introduce these, the unconscious bias that we spoke about, making them aware about this particular issue, and having maybe training sessions where people do understand that this is important and we need to have larger number of inclusion in that sense. Also, in terms of, at least from a firm perspective, what I can say is that when you have clients coming in terms of client, in front of the clients, maybe championing your women colleagues who are good at their work, maybe, talking about them, giving them an opportunity to speak, allowing them and encouraging them to move forward. I think these are some of the things that we need to at least start off, because we have policies, we have things in place, and I think Shreya had also mentioned this earlier, that but are we really acting on them? Is there any real work that is being done with respect to that at all levels, at an individual level also?
I just want to add one point to the practical aspect of what can be done. And I found an analogy in what the high courts around India have been doing in the young arbitrator appointments. Is that when it first started, it was a very uncomfortable thing for parties, solicitors, clients to have junior counsels, between the age of 30 to 40, acting as judges. Over a period of 5 to 8 years, this has become the de facto, the default option. Now people want only junior counsels. They don't want to go to seniors or retired judges because they've seen the system work so beautifully. The point I'm trying to make is that familiarity and the push that the High Court gave young arbitrators has brought about a sense of comfort in the legal community that yes, this is a system which is working great, and this has been a paradigm shift which one has seen in under a generation. The parallel I want to draw is to urge institutions to adopt that model for arbitrator appointments, because the more women that are seen on panels acting as arbitrators, sole arbitrators, as Sheila mentioned, co-chairs, will make the system far more familiar and palatable to the community as a whole. And that, I think, is a very practical push in the direction of doing something to shift the needle at a very real-time level as opposed to just statistics.
Thank you. Anything from Payel or Sheila? Thanks. I think we have 2 more questions, so we can. Hi. Firstly, I want to thank all the panelists for taking out this time and talking about this important issue. I spent about 7 years practicing at a law firm, and in my experience, what I've seen is that when I started 7 years back, there were a lot of women at the fresher level, as you said, making notes. As Ankita said that, the key is to stay at the crease and consistently perform and stick around for long. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Like within a short span of 4 to 5 years, you see a lot of attrition, women quitting. So women also tend to give up. So do you have any thoughts on that? And whether as a fraternity, what are the things that we can do to ensure that in those initial years, those freshers get the right sort of mentorship to stick around post that 4-year, 5-year, 6-year mark? So I think that would take us to what Sheila had said earlier, the three do's and the three don'ts. So if Sheila, would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just briefly, I'm sure others will have something to add, but I do think that there is a point beyond which you do have to take matters into your own hands. And I think, where I hate to put it as it's so much better now than it was for some of us. It's not really the point, right? The point is actually there are more players now, there are other difficulties, and I think it's just difficult in a different way, in fact. So I do think it's really challenging for, the generation coming through. And I think it's a very fair point about, the attrition, and at what level it happens. But actually, I think that creating the awareness of it is something that maybe didn't exist before. So, you would almost end up in this fork in the road that hit you like a brick, and then you didn't know how to make the choice. And then you decided that actually wasn't a choice because you were so awful at one thing that you must be good at the other. And then you disappeared from the scene. But I think recognizing early on, not just you, but the institution, and if the institution doesn't, then you take steps, as a whole, the mentoring, the awareness, the accountability, to see that the institution recognizes it. But recognizing it early on is really key, because it's like preparing for a case, right? And I very much agree with the idea that, creating the precedent of I can do this is important. Every time I get asked, how do you prepare for a case? You just need to know your case. You need to know your facts really, really, really well. It's no different to your own career. You need to understand what it is you want, map it out. I mean, women are planners at the end of the day. And once you map it out and you see the paths, then it does become a choice. And it's not an easy choice, certainly. And in my view, you don't even potentially have to make the choice. You just need to know how to navigate the two paths. It's actually one of those fork in the roads that you can explore both of. But if you feel that there are impediments to it, it's too late to address it when you're already at that fork. So take 3 steps back and do it early. So the fact that we're doing this at this level is actually much more important to me than, say, senior women partners talking to each other about how they did it. I mean, that's all great, and it's great as a precedent, but it's equally, if not more important, for the people sitting in the room to sit and say, right, where am I at now? And how am I going to navigate that to try and achieve everything that I want to, not by giving anything up, maybe to Ankita's point, by prioritizing and knowing my challenges and facing them. And, it doesn't get easy, but it's actually not easy for anyone. Once you start from that premise, then, that's half the battle.
If I could just add to that, I think the main things are grit, determination, and a little bit of a thick skin. Just don't let things get to you. Push on and be patient, be prepared, be consistent, and don't let it bring you down. I think Rishabh had a question, and then we had a couple of.
I actually didn't have a question, but
Oh.
rather what I thought you guys could offer, and Sheila wearing her young MCI hat could offer, that look, this is ultimately an initiative that the young MCI is trying to champion. And it'll be helpful to hear if you have any suggestions, and those could come now, or we could share in writing as well afterwards. And that applies to anyone. As to what those concrete initiatives could be that young MCI can undertake. Obviously more talks like this, more sessions like this. But if there's anything specific that you see the young MCI, and you guys know enough that beyond the point there's only that much young MCI can achieve as well. But if you had any concrete suggestions, that'd be helpful to hear.
So one thing that I did want to add, and we had it as an initiative amongst the council before, and it was very successful. Was and young MCI can sort of replicate that model in whatever way it thinks appropriate, is to provide mentorship programs to young people who approach them in different areas, whether it's in ADR, whether it's with a counsel or a lawyer in the ADR practice, or have tie-ups with law firms, counsels who would provide them with that mentorship program, the training, the guidance, because a lot of, to come back to the question you had asked, a lot of the disillusionment over a period of time comes from not knowing when you started what you were in for. And as you gradually sort of discover, you feel, oh, this is not what I signed up for. Oh, I wish I'd known about this earlier. I would have taken a different course of action. So what the mentorship program has assisted young people in is to give them a flavor of this is what you're in for. And that has helped a lot of people decide, the career paths, as Sheila said, taking 3 steps back to assess the situation about where you want to go. I think that's something that maybe the young MCIA can look into, if it has those kind of resources. Though it doesn't take really resources as much as it's time from the people involved in the organization.
So Ankita, you'll be happy to hear. But we have launched a mentorship. So that's been on foot for some time, though it doesn't have a diversity dimension.
Right.
And that's a separate point for debate, but should these things have a diversity dimension to them? Because I was hearing also that beyond the point, these things perhaps can be counterproductive as well, right? If you keep adding that dimension to it.
Yeah.
But yes, we have launched
mentorship.
I think there were 2 questions there, and then we can take this as we have the last 4 questions because I think we're really running out of time as well.
Hello, I'm Riya. I'm a law student, and my question is that straight up jump to the question. My question is that are there any instances where you've been denied a leadership role because maybe you don't look as assertive or as aggressive as the other gender? And if yes, then how could it be addressed? And it could just be that maybe you don't want to change your nature to not be less empathetic or not empathetic at all. Because there could be times you've been told that, oh, there's no place for empathy in a field like this. So how could this be addressed? Because maybe you think differently in these when it comes to these questions.
Thanks. So if I can just jump right in there. First things first, it's not true. There is always place for empathy. Second thing is there is absolutely no need to change your personality or change the person that you are. It's fine to not be aggressive. Some people are just inherently soft-spoken, a little more demure. Some people tend to be a little more boisterous. It does not make a difference at the end of the day. I think based on everybody's experience and what everyone has said, at the end of the day, it comes down to the quality of your work and your ability to wait and see it through. So I've been lucky. Frankly, I've been lucky that I've not been denied leadership positions because I look young or because I'm a woman. But having said that, it does happen. I can't deny the fact that it does happen. But it's something which can always be overcome. But happy to hear from the rest of the panel if you have anything else to add.
So, I've had many instances when I started practice in court. It's a very adversarial system. Very often a matter is decided on who speaks the loudest, who speaks first, who's the most aggressive. And as if you start off with being a soft-spoken person or even a woman, it's not always perceived very well if you start, at the highest note, where shrew, cantankerous are the adjectives you sort of hear in the background, right? Having faced all that, I tell you, it's a process. It's not that it can change instantaneously with 1 instance or 2 instances. You have to give it time because that's the nature of the beast. If people find that despite not having been heard the first time, the second time, the third time around, you're back again like a bad penny, right? You will be heard. And you will find your voice soft but assertive, holding the attention of the room. And so I think what I'm trying to tell you is that don't try to change the situation in 1 instance, or don't let 1 instance be determinative of, oh my God, this is not going to work for me. I'm just too soft-spoken. Absolutely not. You can continue to be soft-spoken, it's the best way to be. The opportunity will come to you again, and you will find the tide turning in your favor.
I think Swagata has a question.
Hi everyone, I'm Swagata. I'm a senior. Okay. Hi, can you hear me now? I'm Swagata. I'm a senior associate at Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. Thank you all for this very helpful as well as encouraging discussion. But while there are many such discussions happening and we are trying to stop the unconscious bias that you said, do you think that would be helpful for firms and companies to have actually certain policies and ground rules in place to kind of reduce this unconscious bias? For instance, I know of companies where you've been given a warning notice for statements like, oh, she'll not be able to join us because she's a woman and she has to go home and she has 2 kids. Whereas in that same group, there's a man, it's another kid, who's not being subjected to this statement. So do you think, like, while these discussions are helpful, companies and firms also need to have some rules in place? And the flip side to that is that, do you think if such rules are made, people will be a little apprehensive of working with it? Because they said unconsciously also, if they are saying such statements and they don't mean it, they'll be subjected to something.
So, Payel, would you like to take that question?
So yeah, I do agree that you need policies, but actual implementation of those policies. And at the same time, I do agree that when you have too much written on black and white, and when you actually go ahead and implement it, how does it pan out the relationship or the working equation between two people? Because, I mean, given my experience, I have worked with so many of my male colleagues, and I have had great friendships with certain people. But it again depends on your equation or the bond or your working relationship with that person, that you know where you're crossing boundaries or where you're not. So you do have policies in place, you have their implementation, but at the same time, I feel at times you are the best judge yourself and you draw your own boundaries. So as far as you're clear on that, I think half the battle is won. You know what boundaries can't be crossed.
There's something that I read, generally in preparation for this discussion, is that a lot of companies are also implementing globally certain training tools where there are data, on the basis of data and analytics, they are helping people decide whether the decision that they are taking is actually objective from a general neutral perspective or not. So that is something which is something that can be looked at. Maybe it will take time for something like that to be implemented. And also, I think as Payel said, rules, yes, you can have rules, you already have a lot of rules, but at the end of the day, there needs to be awareness, more of awareness and sensitization to what really the change you want. Till the time there isn't that acknowledgement, that recognition, these rules will not make much of a difference. They'll be just like, oh, I should not be saying this in front of my colleague or in front of my female colleague or in front of this person. That's what they'll eventually do. So I think these are some things that maybe we can focus on, and of course discussions like this is what's really important.
Yeah.
I had actually two comments. One, a shameless plug. The MCIA endeavors to appoint as many women arbitrators. We'll see our list published next year, but we've already crossed 35% of all our appointments are women arbitrators. But beyond that, I want to speak very quickly about what Rishabh suggested, maybe what the young MCIA could do. If the young MCIA could possibly write a small blog on what women experience specifically in the legal sector and shoot that out. It's sort of, even if it changes or impacts one person's view and giving them an encouraging perspective to sort of stay at the crease, I think that makes a huge impact. And if a man were to read it as well, it may get him to check his male privilege in some form or the other, or change perspective. So I think that's something that's really important. That gets missed out because of something that also got pointed out, which is women tend to not be in some of the networking sessions or the social circle. So you get an overwhelming male perspective of everything that's happening. So this may be one small way in which.
Litigation, if I could add to that, we should record, just getting recorded. We should put this on the MCI website as well.
For sure.
Varshini at the back. Yeah, first. Hi, I'm Varshini. I work with the disputes team at Khaitan. So I understand that a lot of people are in fact hyper aware of the differences between men and women, and as Jyoti pointed out, people come to the table with that bias. So, you find it necessary to first prove that you can work twice as hard as your male counterpart, and you end up doing that more often than not. And until the time the world actually recognizes that, the playing field needs to first be leveled before you start playing the same game. How can you ensure that you don't end up burning the candle at both ends and then, just end up veering off the railroad track somewhere on the line? Is there some interim relief that we can perhaps take and just get through?
Sheila, would you like to take that? I thought you were saying something.
Oh dear, that's a really good one. Interim relief. It's usually all about the interim relief, isn't it? It's never about the final relief. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think how do you, first of all, how do you stop yourself sort of making it look like the only way to succeed is by working twice as hard as your male counterparts? I think the starting point is there. It's sort of challenging that presumption, because actually I don't think that's true anymore. I think the other thing that sort of society is doing is providing opportunities to the men to go and do things like parental leave, to also escape from the scene a bit, to get a little bit of a taste of, the family life and work balance that they deserve too, but also to make that field a bit more level playing. So there are things that are happening, I guess, and with those times changing, so should we. And I don't think I ever operated actually on the basis of comparing myself, whether in terms of hours or productivity, to any colleagues. In fact, I just kept my head down and kept going, and just worked out what I wanted to do against my own standards, rather than who's on my left and right. Sure, there comes a point where there are opportunities that in the pyramid system people get filtered out, but I do promise you, I'm not sure that in 9 out of 10 of those situations, the filtering out happens because of that level of productivity. In fact, there were years where my busyness got held against me because it was too high, and they felt that, my management felt that I was somebody who, if I wanted a life beyond A&O, I wasn't going to get it actually, because I made no space for it for myself. So, if you're in a nice sort of healthy environment, and I agree that that is the key, and that's sort of for one to navigate as an individual, then you've got to filter out that stuff around you, and you set your goals and you follow them. And if there are noises around that kind of change things, and change your perspectives. For instance, if somebody in a management position makes a comment, and this does happen, right? I'm not saying there's a perfect world out there, that, oh, this person works twice as hard, or this person can do that, that really beneficial secondment that you obviously can't because you're a new mom. Call on that behavior. And it does not mean you sit there and argue with that person who maybe cuts your paycheck, not like that. I think to Payel's point about don't make it a rant, but I would find the right forum, and there are forums now, to call on that behavior, because that isn't the way it's supposed to work. And I would challenge those prejudices, because as I say, I have seen that decisions are actually not made on that basis. In fact, even up to the partnership level, going on maternity leave once, twice, 3 times, it's actually not seen as just a hard numbers game. It never is. I'm not sure it ever was actually, but it certainly isn't at the moment. And where there is that environment, I would take it upon yourself to challenge it, even if you're doing it on your way out.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I think that brings us to the end of this session. It's been great, and I hope we just keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thanks also to Khaitan and MCIA, obviously, for organizing this.
And with that, the panel comes to an end, but we still do have a couple of things left. So if everyone could just stay on the link.
No, but you have to
Thank
stay
you.
on. Oh, no, not a minute, but here everyone would stay on because the drinks and the food. But my name is Shreya Gupta. I'm here in my capacity as a co-chair of the Young MCIA. Sheila, who accompanies me, one of my other co-chairs,
Sorry to interrupt you, Rishabh. I think for the online guests, it might be good if we could see you.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, sorry. You
Thank you, Rishabh.
Don't worry. Right.
Sorry, I'll just repeat whatever I said. I'm giving my capacity as a co-chair of the MCIA. Sheila, Ahuja, and Alipa Banerjee are happy to co-chairs. And what, I mean, obviously you've heard a very good discussion on the diversity initiative that the MCIA in Chatterjee. What wanted to sort of talk about is initiative. There's in particular one initiative which we are effectively launching. And it's all sort of close to what the kind of stuff that you guys have been chatting about. So over the past year or so, we've launched a mentorship program, which has actually been a really good success. So we found quite a few mentors, senior practitioners in the field, not just from India but abroad, and lots of students and young practitioners. So I am, for example, also mentoring two young practitioners. Sheila is doing the same, Alipa is doing the same, and there are lots of other mentors sort of spread across the institution. We've launched with Sheila's perseverance, we've launched this sort of diversity initiative. We've also been doing quite a bit in terms of education program, an arbitration training program. We're also working with the young people. So again, Sheila is doing quite a bit in that direction. And the other initiative which we are hopefully launching later this year is the traveling secretary training program. That's what I wanted to teach about. So, of course, I suspect almost all of you are arbitration practitioners, people who sort of are enthusiastic about arbitration. So, tribunal secretary as a concept would not be new. What we felt at Young MCIA is that the feedback that we received from lots of people was that they were, and I suspect that's true for a lot of people sitting in this focus file, is that they're enthusiastic about arbitration, but they don't necessarily get to experience it. And they don't get to experience it primarily because they're in a setting where they don't get it. Right? So they have a law firm which does do a lot of arbitration work. They may be at a law firm that does arbitration work, but they're not in a team that does arbitration work. They may be with a counsel, not with Ankita, but with someone else who doesn't get to do arbitration there, and so on and so forth. Right? So one was that so we can all say this is very different. This is a more generic topic. But most of the time, the stuff that we do is all about talking about arbitration, right? But we all know that ultimately arbitration is not really a substantive academic field. It's a hollow field. It's all about contract laws, performance, stuff like that. Largely, it's about procedure and practice. So unless you get to actually experience a hearing, how do you put in practice all the stuff that we learn through these training programs? So one was that, and the other feedback that we were getting, and as as Mangaldas brought us in, more arbitrator appointments, more former judges, more senior practitioners getting appointments. We know that they don't have the administrative setup to manage that kind of appointment. And that gets into a bad thing as well, right? Because very often the busy guys, they take too many arbitral appointments and they just don't have the setup to manage that. So the one way we thought we could marry all of that together is by launching this tribunal secretary training program, where we would train a young cadre of practitioners. By young, I mean effectively people below 10 years of post-qualification. Not, unfortunately, not students, but of course, I don't think it makes sense at all for it to be at the student level. Maybe a few years post-qualification, you're at a law firm, you're in counsel practice, you've tasted dispute resolution, not necessarily arbitration, you're enthusiastic about that. And you apply for this. We will train you. And when I say we, I would personally not train you, but we get the best trainers in the world. We select you. So the application process will begin in December. We are hopeful that we receive lots of applications. We'll select it. Yeah. Not for this way. We find the best trainers to come down to India. here in India. We'll train you over a period. And then with motivational support, community support, these cadre of individuals, they will actually go on MCIA. Yeah. So this will be a list which will be published by MCIA. MCIA will push. MCIA would say to their appointed arbitrators that should you need support, here are 20 people we have trained. Yeah. Of course, you can't, no one will be compelled to you, but you'll be promoted by MCIA. And you would be available to ad hoc appointments as well. So, and actually that's where it's even more important, because that's where the real support is. So you'll be open to them. And our hope is that over time, this cadre of tribunal secretaries, they would make a difference to how arbitrations are run. And over time, this will make a difference to your own country, right? So you get to see these arbitrations very, which you may not otherwise. The other thing is that at least sort of globally, tribunal secretaries are paid by arbitrators. We would not get involved in that process. The arbitrators, of course, would choose how to contact the tribunal secretaries. There are all those rules around what kind of disclosure, etc., should be about tribunal secretaries. Whether or not MCI comes up with some guidance around that, that's a point for later. We're not discussing that just now. But that's the yeah. So we will open this up in December. The first training will happen towards the end of January. We don't know whether it could be once a year affair or twice a year affair. It depends on what kind of response we receive. I suspect it will be an overwhelming response because, tell me maybe later on in during cocktail if you think this initiative is not the right initiative or should be done slightly differently. But I do think genuinely believe it's the right initiative. So I suspect we get a very good response, and if it's a good response, we do it first. Yeah. So that's it. That's all. Now.
So we have patience.
Oh, sorry. You should come sit where I was. Yeah. Thank you.
It's always to close on the such session. Thank you to all the panelists for trying to you have been inspired. I'm sure that your story will inspire a lot of women and men as well, trying to make sure that this corrective action is taken. More frank and open and frank discussions like this are bound to make broaden the awareness that everybody has, as well as also take action in kind of making sure that these issues are addressed in the future. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for all the people who've done blogging, so that I hope you guys go back and do the changes.
Thank you. Well done. Well moderated. Well
Fantastically moderated.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, all of you. Enjoy your drinks, and I shall see some of you tomorrow. Take care.
Sure.